dive right in, but we'll give folks a couple more minutes to trickle in. I always like to start these MSP events with a fun little icebreaker to get to know our speakers for today. Today's question for the icebreaker, I'd love to know, are you an early morning person or a night owl? And we'll start things with Brad.
I am definitely an early morning person, not a night person. I will say sometimes a little slow to start the morning. If I don't get my 6 shots of espresso, I'm not going to be my sunny, nice self. But when night rolls around, 8:45, my wife's usually poking me on the couch, telling me to stop snoring. So, not an exciting night owl.
At what time do you wake up in the morning?
Early.
So vague,
Lovely.
Brad. Like 4 a.m. or 6 a.m.?
Somewhere in between, like 4:45, 5 o'clock, right in there.
Oh, wow. Especially with daylight savings that just happened. I'm sure that's kind of
Well,
throws
it's
you
made
off.
it a little bit easier for a
Oh,
couple of
easier,
weeks,
right.
for
Yep.
sure.
Jordana, what about you?
I used to be morning, especially when I worked in corporate and you had early morning flights and early morning meetings. Would try to get everything done, but I have transitioned to night. So the beautiful part about owning your own company is you can build some flexibility into that, and so I do find that I have a lot of creativity at night. I will also tell you too, like I'm not one of those people who, if I toss and turn while I'm sleeping, keep doing that. I just get up. I've learned that after about 10 minutes, you just get up and keep going. So I'm night now, Ange.
Yeah, I heard that if you have insomnia or you can't sleep, the best thing that you can do is get up and walk around. So exactly what you said.
Yeah.
The worst thing that you can do is stay in bed and it won't work. That's what I heard.
Nope.
Jacqueline, what about you?
I'm a lot of both actually. I'm a big fan of burning the candle at both ends. So I love a sunrise,
Yeah.
but I also love to sleep in. I love going to bed at 9, and I also really love staying up until 4 in the morning listening to music. So I'm really all over the place. I
I
love
love
all.
that. I used to be a night person, but when I moved from Toronto, East Coast, to Vancouver, West Coast, my circadian rhythm was so used to the East Coast timeline. So I was up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., which is great. I've never been a morning person, but my body was unintentionally a morning person since moving to the opposite side of the world. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Excited to dive right in. Before we dive into the content and talk to our amazing panelists that we have today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who are not familiar, hi everyone. My name is Angelica. I'm one of the community event managers at MSP. Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they might not know about. We do this through online sessions like the one you're at today. We also have an online robust forum, and we also have our quarterly summits. We're also going to go back into in-person events sometime soon, so stay tuned. We might come to a city near you. And I'm super excited to announce our sponsor for today's event. Vericent is the leading provider of innovative sales performance management software focused on helping organizations plan, operate, and pay to drive sales performance and growth. They have a full suite of solutions to assist in smarter territory and quota planning, efficient lead to revenue operations in the fastest, most flexible way to pay sellers accurately and on time. They combine powerful SPM technologies with augmented intelligence powered solutions to enable customers to quickly and easily see and address sales trends, problem areas, and opportunities by predicting outcomes and prescribing actions to optimize revenue. I'm going to drop their link in the chat, so be sure to check them out. Now, quick housekeeping notes. This event is recorded, as well as if you have any friends or colleagues that couldn't make it, don't worry. The recording and key takeaways will be made available on the previous MSP website before the end of day. And if you have questions for our panelists today, definitely leverage the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner or the chat. I asked a question already in the chat where everyone is calling in from, so definitely let us know where you're calling in from. And if you have a question for our speakers, definitely take advantage. We have really great experts today. Speaking of our experts, a little fun introduction. I'm going to pass it off to Jordana to kick things off with a round robin introductions, and I'm going to go wrap up. I'm going to come back for wrap up on stage, but first things first, we're going to kick it off to our speakers. And Jordana, if you want to kick things off, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Ange. First of all, thank you everybody for coming this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are dialing in from. My name is Jordana, and I founded a recruitment agency that is sales focused on everything from entry level to executive in North America. My background is that I spent just about 20 years as a sales leader in a few different industries such as tech, transportation, and media. And I've hired thousands of sales candidates throughout my career, and am very, very passionate when it comes to human resources and organizational behavior, but more importantly, when it comes to salespeople and the health of sales organizations. So thank you for coming, and I'll kick it over to Brad.
Thanks so much, Jordana. So I'm Brad Berneman. I'm an executive at Blue Horizons Group. We specialize in helping companies make sure that your sales performance is optimized. And I personally have been working in this space for coming up on 25 years. Everything from technology implementations through to helping customers solve the real business challenges around how do you get the most out of your sales team and how do you drive more efficient sales behaviors. So that's a little bit on me. Jacqueline, I'll pass it over to you.
Hello, Jacqueline Lane. Currently, I hold a role as product marketing manager at Vericent, but my background was steeped in sales. So I started out as a small business prospecting machine, and grew and evolved into enterprise sales, mostly for tech companies. And I've learned, kind of what's worked and what's not worked from a personal perspective. And now taking all of that experience and being able to lend it back to the business side versus the seller side, and working with the broader strategy team and the product team to bring really cool products and features and package it up in a way that people are excited about the sizzle as well as the steak. So really glad that everybody's here today. So thank you so much for everybody joining, and for the people who've joined us online. So let me throw out since we don't have an official moderator, we're going to try to get through a couple of questions that we brainstormed that might be interesting to the folks who are listening. And the first question was, what works and what doesn't work when recruiting for sales talent? So I think the natural place to start here is with Jordana. I think Brad and I certainly can talk from a sales perspective, as well as from a leadership perspective and hiring. But from a recruiting standpoint, Jordana, maybe you can kick off.
Yeah. And please feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat. I'll be taking a look at it, and I'll pause after each one of our questions just to see if I can address what's being stated in the group. So, I love this question because I often get asked it by prospective companies when they're saying, hey, Jordana, this is the type of person that I would like to hire for. So first of all, before you even put your job description out, before you build your compensation plan, you need to figure out what type of salesperson do you need? What type of sales are they doing? Jackie just mentioned a little bit about being a prospecting machine early on in her career and has grown into enterprise sales. These are two distinct different skill sets. So you need to sit down and evaluate what's important to you and your organization before you figure out the type of sales talent that you want. You're going to hear this word from Brad, from Jackie, and from me, transparency, throughout, I think, this conversation. When we talk about transparency amongst what the role is, the responsibilities, the travel, the pay, the commission plan. So often I hear people interviewing and they do not share details of commission plans, even not in an offer. They say, after you accept, we will share details of the commission plan. And, to me, most salespeople nowadays, they're not willing to take that risk. So I think, what works is figure out and assess what your current needs are for where you want to be, what type of a salesperson you want. What doesn't work is trying to be deceitful in terms of not sharing details on commission or salary. As well, I think, people just really want to know what challenges your current sales organization is encountering, because they want to know if that's something that they can help you with, or maybe that's not a skill set that they have. So really, that interview is much more of a collaborative process than an interrogation.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting take on it. But I think that I can speak to transparency as well. One of the big things that kept me in sales for so much of my career was flexibility. Yeah. So having the knowledge that if something came up personally, I could handle it, and I had the ability to move around my schedule as need be. That was really, really important to me. But certainly have been in plenty of interviews where they, were not transparent about the role. Or part of what I want to know is why were people not successful in this role before? Mm-hmm. And so, and I don't want hiring companies to make up a story to make me feel good about it. I would want to know a version of the truth that doesn't make me run and hide if it's if it's as bad as all that.
Well, and you're right, Jackie, because there's so many places you can look online, whether Fishbowl, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, to be able to see what people are writing about the organization that you're interviewing in. So, if you're going into an interview with someone and they address something that's been seen online, please don't be dismissive of it and say that, oh, that was written by, a frustrated ex-employee. Please address it head on. You will lose credibility as an organization.
Mm-hmm. So, Brad, what have you found, personally, when you are being recruited? Not that you would in your current state, because you're one of the big cheeses there, just like Jordana. But, when you are recruiting for folks, what have you found worked and not worked?
There's a couple of things. First and foremost, everybody's going to look at compensation. I think that's a key cornerstone to any sales role. They really want to understand, and Jordana nailed it with the transparency piece. Really being able to provide clear insights into what's going on with how you're being paid, what the territory will be that you're responsible for, what are your targets. Beyond that, really looking at a couple of other things like culture. How does the organization work? Is this someplace that it's going to be a fit? And then really, is there a chance, especially for newer sellers, is there a career path? Is there a way that I can grow my career? I can learn more about how to be successful in this space. Sales is a tough business. I mean, anytime I talk to somebody young that's thinking about getting into it, I play the Alec Baldwin scene from Glengarry, and try to make sure they know what they're getting into with this whole business. So, yeah.
As we wrap up the topic, I did some research because I think that impartial stats, I think stories have entertainment value and can help people put things in the back of their heads. But I found this blog, and it talked about how it takes a recruiter about 14 hours to find one candidate that works. But if you're looking for a couple of takeaways, they talked about 4 ways to mishandle a candidate. One is a slow interview process. I have certainly been a part of this. And it's do they actually, if this is an indication of how this company works, do I want to work there? The second is failing to sell the opportunity, which is tell the candidate how much they want to be there. The third is presenting a lowball offer, which is kind of insulting. And if they haven't been in sales, they're not going to start negotiating. And then passing on candidates that don't aggressively pursue the opportunity. So just because they don't pursue it doesn't mean they won't be great at the job. So I thought it'd be fun to sum up with those.
Yep. I'm just looking at the chat, and we do have a question. So I'm just going to read it out loud. It's from Jay, and he says, I'm having a hard time hiring for a sales rock star / top performer due to pre-existing guardrails with comp / title from HR. How have you creatively worked around or with hiring parameters? That is a great question. I can take a crack at this first. So interestingly enough, I do have an HR background as well. And I know that HR is often seen as, the most negative person at the table, right? They're always telling you no, HR and legal. But what I would say is that oftentimes when you are encountered with what you're calling those guardrails, it's a misalignment in leadership in terms of market pay, equity pay internally, as well as compensation. So perhaps there is an opportunity for HR and leadership to sit down at the table and discuss whether or not they are being competitive with their pay. I'm not sure what your role is at your company, but that would be where I would start. There are a bunch of, different resources, and I'm sure Brad can speak to them as well in terms of addressing pay equity and addressing whether or not you are being competitive in the market. And perhaps it's also, you mentioned a top performer, rock star. Does that person need to come from with a book of business from a certain industry? So all of those factors will matter when it comes to pay. As an example, I'm working on a role right now where I had to go back to the company and let them know after 2 months that the channel account manager that they want to hire, who has 5 years of experience working for a networking solutions company, isn't going to come in at 140K OTE. They're coming in at 200K OTE. So sometimes you going back to leadership and communicating to them, here's what I'm finding in the market is what's necessary too. Brad, what are your thoughts?
No, I think that's a great approach to begin with. The other kind of options that I see are, can you look at the pay mix? Can you remix it a bit and say, hey, we're going to give you a lower base, but the upside is going to be much more rewarding, and will HR give you some latitude to work around that? If the answer is no, one other approach you might want to take is really trying to find, extending that hiring cycle and trying to find somebody who's maybe a diamond in the rough, somebody that's earlier in their career that they are a rock star. They're just not, they haven't achieved rock star status yet. Because at the end of the day, what you're really trying to drive is sales results. So if you can find somebody who can do that job and maybe they fit that profile that you're given by HR, but it's going to be a harder road to get there, I would say.
Yeah, I think that both of those strategies, it's like going back and confirming that, we need more and changing the pay mix. And then, I always consider kind of this softer, less quantifiable factors that you can talk to your candidates about. And considering there are all these different types of incentives, the 3 categories or programs are from an economic standpoint, which is just sheer dollars. The second is social, so team events and camaraderie and culture and, recognition and rewards. Maybe they're more excited about trips for President's Club or Quick Start or whatever. And the third thing is kind of this reward system around morals. So it's this idea that you care about the same types of things as your employees do. So I think that there's certainly the micro job that you need to market. But then also, I think there's the macro organization that's really important for you to market as an organization and get people on board that way.
Got it. I think before we go over to number 2, we've got a quick poll that we wanted to do. All right. So, what is the number 1 use of data in a sales organization? There is a polls button that you can click on to vote, and we'll just give it a minute and wait and see. Got about 4 votes. I'll just give it another minute or 2. All right, I think we'll close off. Let's see what the results are. So if anybody's curious, this is according to LinkedIn's annual report that they they put out, the state of sales. So it looks like with over 11 votes, we've got assess performance. And you're absolutely right. All of these are factors in uses of data within a sales organization. But with almost 50%, assessing performance is the number one use of data. And I just think that this speaks to the fact that when you're hiring salespeople, they're going to be looking at their performance metrics more than they're looking at their bank account, which is going to be a lot. So to be transparent around that and allow them the opportunity to understand where they stand is critical.
Well, when you talk about, people looking at their performance metrics, one of the questions that we're going to get to after the next one is, the value of a sales tech stack when you're hiring. Before that, part of the reason why employees leave is because they don't know where they stand from a performance standpoint. They have no way to track or measure. Their numbers are always wrong. They spend a ton of time on like disputes and what we call shadow accounting in the biz, where people basically have their own spreadsheets where they track all of their own transactions. But as it pertains to voluntary turnover, I found another stat, because I love me a stat. During the first 90 days at a new job, the relationship between a new hire and their employer is basically as vulnerable as it gets, with 20% of all employee turnover happening in the first 3 months. So, Brad, talk to me about employee turnover as it pertains to kind of your experience in the sales performance management space and in your career personally.
Yeah, I'm going to take an even broader perspective than that. If you look at what's happened in the overall market over the last couple of years, we had the pandemic hit. We were already kind of on a path to higher job turnover. If you look at the way Gen Z evaluates, and has that employer-employee relationship, they tend to be a little bit quicker to move than, generations that came before them. And what that's turned into is a much higher turnover across the board. When you add in the pandemic and all the chaos that we've seen, sales has certainly not been immune to that. We heard a lot about the Great Resignation over the last couple of years. And it's sometimes you wonder, is this talking heads data points, or is there something really going on here? So I did a little digging because I like stats too, Jacqueline. And found the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US has a number that they track. They call it JOLTS, which is the Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. And it looks at what the quit rate is that's seasonally adjusted. So we know that, some jobs are going to come and go during, the holiday season, things like that. They adjust for all that. In March of 2021, that quit rate beat a 20-year record. It hit 2.5%. That record was beat in April that same year when it went up to 2.8, and then hit 3.3% in November of 2021, and was 3% again in December of 2021. So we've seen a lot of churn in the overall job market, and it's not over. The World Economic Forum has been doing surveys. They are expecting that a full fifth of employees, 20% of employees, are planning to make job changes in the coming year. So there's been a lot of churn. There will continue to be a lot of churn, and we're seeing it in our industry, in the space that we're in, both with our technical resources and our sales resources. There's a lot of movement on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I did some digging around and found that according to this article by Forbes, it said that they're calling it a quitter's market. 53% of Americans made a career change in 2021. Imagine half of the workforce made a change. And so, yeah, I think that there's something to be said about this idea that the people are turning over faster than before. And perhaps that, and I reflect on it and I wonder, is this a function of just the kind of impatience that we're all kind of starting to get with our life. We talked earlier, Brad got a hot water tea thing installed in his kitchen. And I was like, it's like Amazon for tea. It's like you need a pen delivered tomorrow at 9 a.m. 10 a.m. is not good enough. I need it at 9. So maybe it's like a reflection of, society's impatience for more, better, faster, like now.
My TikTok video better not be longer than 3 minutes or it's going to lose my attention.
Yeah, 3 minutes. You can solve all the world's problems in 3 minutes. So I think this question was really around, the cost of voluntary turnover. So Jordan, how long does it typically take to find a seller when someone comes to your door and says, okay, we need, barring the channel account manager with 5 years of very industry specific experience? How long does it take to find that person?
So on average, if you know what you're looking for, from the time that, I start sourcing till you meet people, till people start, you're on average now about 60 days. It used to be about 30 days at the beginning of the pandemic, but now you're about double that time. And, Jackie and Brad, you guys brought up so many great points. What I see as a recruiter is that we need to stop thinking of retention as you're going to be at this company for your whole career and graduate with a watch and like a gold star and ride off into the sunset and to your lovely life. Like, that's not how it's working anymore. You should be happy to be able to keep people for a few years. And if you truly don't have an opportunity for them to progress with their career in your company, then they're going to look elsewhere. And that is okay. Most companies, I was at a talent acquisition conference out west a little earlier this year that had 100 HR managers brought together from a variety of different industries. And everybody was concerned about that exact same topic. How do we retain people? It's so expensive to hire people. And my thought was, stop focusing on this retention piece around 10, 20 years and start focusing around, if we can get them to do what we need them to do within a few years, then how can we help them progress to the next step? I will tell you right now, the most impatient, and I actually love it, but the most impatient of all sellers out there are SDRs. So entry level sales development reps that you've got crushing the phones and they're doing cold call after cold call after cold call. No one wants to do that job for years. And if you do, and you're in this group, please put up your hand and tell me how you're doing it. But no one wants to do that job for years. So if you're not showing that individual a path to the next step pretty quickly, they don't care. They're out. I speak to probably, I at least have 20 to 30 conversations a day. And the conversations that I have with people who are between 20 and 25, whether you like it or not, this is what they're saying. They're saying, well, I kind of look at the old guard at organizations and you've ruined the organization. I'm never going to be able to afford to buy a house. Climate change is going on. What's happening in the political world? I don't need to respect you. So if this isn't working for me and I'm not getting what I need, I'm out. The last thing I would say is HR has so much data. They are data rich. And I don't think that they're sharing the data that they have that could really help the rest of the organization to make hiring and retention decisions. A perfect example of that is exit interviews. How frequently is your HR department coming back to you with that tangible evidence from somebody who has left? So I think that stuff is critical. And we do have a question in the chat group. And Donnie, great question. He's saying, out here in California, salary ranges will need to be posted with job postings effective 2023. Do you all feel that this shift will impact quit rate? I've got some thoughts on this, but if anybody else wants to go, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on this one. But we're watching this really closely because it's not just California. There are a number of states who have put forward these same type of initiatives. And, we said we'd say this word a lot. We're really looking at it as an opportunity to provide transparency. So organizationally, we're just going to go ahead and embrace this and start to put this out on every job posting that we've got, because it just makes sense. Like, people understand it takes away some of the concern, hey, am I being taken advantage of? Is my peer doing better than I am? So I don't know if that directly impacts the quit rate, but to me, it's just another way that we can provide that transparency and that engagement that you need to try to keep people on board and part of your organization for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think it's actually like the shortest of shortcuts to benchmarking base salaries. So, certainly you might be able to acquire people under the cloak and dagger of the former days, but people are going to find out eventually. And if any salesperson is worth his or her own money where their mouth is, I mixed analogies there. They're going to be interviewing at multiple places, and they'll be able to suss out whether someone is underpaying or not pretty quickly.
Yeah, to your point, Jackie, if you have a horrible compensation plan and you haven't done your homework when it comes to your base salaries, 100%, Donnie, it's going to impact quit rate. It's going to impact quit rate anyways when Sally finds out that you brought on Johnny at $10,000 more than her and she just started 6 months ago. But whether you posted for that or not, they're probably going to talk and tell each other, because as sellers, we a lot of times have big mouths and we're really proud of our achievements and we like to talk about how much we made on our commission check. So organizational planning is going to be absolutely critical here. But what I can tell you is, more than it impacting quit rate, it's going to positively impact your recruitment efforts. Just on LinkedIn alone, I have over a 70% connection rate with candidates that I reach out to, because I tell them the name of the company, the salary, and the commission. So even if they're not in the market, they're writing back to me and saying, thank you for being transparent and letting me know, rather than saying, I have some mythical job with a lot of money at this great organization. No one has time for that anymore. So it goes back to transparency again.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think too, when we talk about transparency, and originally we just did that poll a little while ago, like what do you use data for? What's the most critical thing for you to show to your sales reps? When we talk about the cost of turnover, I have a bunch of stats here. Very quickly, it's about 150% cost of the average annual salary it costs to replace someone. Not to mention the opportunity cost of the 6 months it takes to ramp. And if that person has a $500,000 quota, which is really not that aggressive for a mid-market rep, that's an opportunity cost of $250,000 for every single rep. So there's that piece. But then how do you relay that you've got kind of a pro sales culture? Brad said this to us when we were having conversation one time, and he said, I think one of the most important things for candidates and for sellers is to feel like they're going to be supported from a technology perspective. So considering, Brad, you had that pro sales culture idea. Tell me a little bit about what you've experienced when you're interviewing reps, and kind of how you've executed on that at Blue Horizon Group.
Yeah, to me, it's really about getting that level of engagement and making them feel like there is a path for them. They're going to be an important part of the organization, that we're really focused on making sales valued within the organization. Part of it comes from leadership, providing visibility and having that level of communication and openness. A lot of it comes with the transparency that we've already talked about. And a big piece of it comes with having, good, strong tools for your sales team to be able to use, investing in them and showing, hey, we're going to make this job as easy for you as we possibly can, with things like good CRM. Nobody loves CRM, but it can make the job a lot easier. Things like document management, lead sourcing applications where you can get access to good data, pricing and quoting. But, going back to kind of where we started, compensation is the cornerstone of the whole thing. So if you've got a good incentive compensation system that provides visibility, that's going to help them understand more about, what is my quota? Where do I stand in terms of what my territory is? Building that stronger trust, or building that trust really builds a stronger relationship with the overall organization. And that's what we see work in a big way.
Brad, that there's a question that you just touched on. It's in the chat that Brian Bowers is asking: how important is company culture versus compensation when it comes to retention for sales roles, especially? And the part two to that question is: have you seen a shift in this since the pandemic and the shift to working from home?
So I think compensation gets reps in the door. I think culture keeps them. And to me, that's exactly the way we look at it. In our company, we really want to reward good sales behavior, really make sure it's team focused first, which means the company's going to reward you when you're putting in the effort and doing the hard job of sales. From the shift since the pandemic, I think it's amplified something that was already there. So, the importance of culture, the importance of building that relationship, it's gotten harder, especially with working from home culture. When our organization, for example, we are scattered across North America. We're not enormous, but if I showed you guys a picture of like where our people are based, it looks like somebody shot a shotgun at all of North America. There's just dots everywhere. So for us to keep that culture and that relationship, it takes a lot of work from our leadership team, but it's important. And whenever we do it the right way, you can see the impact from our team. Like you can see the buy-in and how meaningful it is for them.
I think you said something kind of interesting there too, is the connection between the leadership and the culture. And I think the same thing happens with incentive comp and technology. It's this kind of idea that the leadership is behind the sellers. So I've certainly worked for organizations where it was not sales focused. So in the last 6-7 years, I worked for a company with no CRM, no incentive comp, and it felt like I had taken a giant step back because I was prospecting and keeping track on Excel spreadsheets. I was sending emails out. It was and like tracking when I was supposed to call someone next time. It was really tough and creates this just sheer volume of work for a seller that there's 1,000 tools out there. There are 1,000 apps out there that can take away all of the administration. So like on average, a rep spends about 60% of their time on admin. Like if you were able to make it easier for them to do what you brought them on to do, like imagine the impact that would have on their ability to hit targets. Jordana, any thoughts on this before we talk about kind of specific tech that you've seen work? I know Brad mentioned ICM, which is near and dear to my heart. Any other thoughts on kind of the tech stack as a whole before we move into the next question?
Yeah, I mean, I think Eduardo's asking a question about spiffs that I know we're going to get to. So I'll come back to Eduardo's question because I think it's a great one. Oftentimes when I am interviewing sales candidates, they will ask me the question and say, what's the tech stack that the company has? And I would say it happens a lot more frequently with people who are in business development roles and a lot more frequently with people who are enterprise sellers, because they know that if they're not going to be supported through technology and other resources, that their job is going to be near impossible. Gone are the days where you throw someone a phone book and say, get calling. Like no one is doing that anymore. So, Brad, it's funny, you mentioned CRM. Like CRM is the baseline. I don't care what you're using, whether it's Dynamics, whether it's Salesforce, whether it's HubSpot, like that is the baseline. But if you're putting crap data into it and all of the other sellers before you have put crap data into it, then it's useless. So the hygiene of that is absolutely critical. Business development tools such as Lusha or ZoomInfo or Sales Navigator, they all want to know what am I using for business development? They'll want to know what are they using for project management, because they're going to be consulting with sales ops and marketing and other departments as well. Email management tools. So they want to hear that there are efficiency tools so that they're not going to be wasting their time on non-administrative tasks, like Jackie said. And part of that comes into that visibility into where am I to target. I don't want to have to wait for some guy in accounting to come out with a weekly report that shows me where I'm at to target. I want to be able to go in and look and see, this is how much money that I'm earning, and this is what I need to do in the next few days to get my stuff done.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I think Brad earlier talked about the fact that, reps want to be able to see where they are right this moment in terms of their performance. So not just revenue, but also commission. Like if I'm going to, put a down payment on a house in 3 months, if I close this deal and if I close this deal, will I get there? So there's kind of this what if tool calculator that there's this real desire for. And then there's this second thing, like people want to be able to also see how close am I to an accelerator? And that's really, really hard to track if you don't have a, drum roll, incentive compensation tool to help to support that, and often tied into a CRM like Salesforce.com.
So not to overbeat the transparency drum, but what you just described is all about transparency. So it's look, sales is kind of a weird business. It's a lot of games, right? Salespeople are working with procurement. Procurement will try to play tricks on you. Sales management is reshuffling things and always moving the goalposts. If you can be really transparent with how you're handling your compensation and really transparent with all of the things you just described, right? Where do I stand today? Where am I at against accelerators? It starts to help the salesperson shape what their job and what their next actions are going to be. From my own experience, when I was an individual contributor seller, I would look at my what if calculator at least 3 times a day and look at it and go, what are the deals that I'm working right now? Where does that move the needle for me? What's going to make the most impact to me personally? Because for better or worse, salespeople are sort of coin operated. It really gave me clear direction on what activities do I need to focus on to drive this specific deal forward and get me to the next level. And it comes back to one simple thing. Do you have the right incentive compensation plan in place? Do you have a good tool to handle that? If you put the right plan in place that's very clearly defined, you don't want to make too much complexity because salespeople can get lost in the details. But if you put that in place, it will drive the salespeople to do the business that you want them to do as an organization. And that's ultimately what leaders are looking at when they look at putting incentive comp plans in place, is pushing the right business. Eduardo had asked a question about, building enticing spiffs. That it really kind of gets to it, right? Is looking at what are the corporate objectives. Let's put a spiff in place that's clear. It's easy for people to understand how they're going to be rewarded on it, and give them a way to be able to track their progress towards it. To me, if I'm a rep, that's going to be something that I'm going to be looking at, and quite honestly did look at a lot when I was a rep.
Well, it's when I saw the how do you build enticing spiffs, to me, it was like, I think the most important thing about building a spiff is understanding before you roll it out what the potential impact is going to be. I don't think there's anything more scary than creating a spiff and having no idea what the likelihood is of having to pay out 10 times what you think you're going to have to pay out. So getting an understanding, like forecasting what the cost of that spiff is going to be versus the benefit of the rep selling, is critical. And the second piece is, how do you measure the success of a spiff if you're changing the spiff every single time, changing the season every time without any baseline? So with a tool like incentive compensation, you have the ability to create a benchmark with that first spiff you create, with the first spiff you build, scenario model it to understand what the forecast and cost is going to be, and then test them against each other across time so that you can really hone in on how do we get the most revenue out of these spiffs, and also how do we excite the right kind of behavior we want from our reps. Because comp is one of those very, very few levers within a business that can attach strategy at the highest level, business objectives. We want to grow this business line in this geo, this particular product, to your revenue generating activities. So it's one of the few things you can do that. And what better way than to like put it into a place where you can baseline and measure changes over time.
The behavior piece, Jackie, I have a client right now who has a team of account executives that historically have not had to do any new business development. And this is a multi-million-dollar multinational company, and they put together a spiff. Their average deal size is about $10,000 to $12,000. They put together a spiff that is incentivizing their account executives from now until December 31st, that dollar for dollar, they will pay them for every new business sale that they bring in. So if they bring in a $10,000 sale, they'll get $10,000. And they modeled it out. And for them to change that behavior versus going out and hiring for new sales reps was more profitable for them. So when you talk about behavior, revenue, best case scenario, because Jackie, I know, we've been in situations before where you've got a rep who did something amazing and they're getting all excited about the commission. And then they go in to talk to their boss and their boss is like, well, we didn't really plan for this. I don't care. I did what you told me to do. Yeah. Eduardo actually has a good part to the first part of his question was, how do we stay current on how much to pay reps and how often?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the first thing to do is open a place in California. I'm only kidding. There's plenty of benchmarking tools out there. Verisant also has a benchmarking app that keeps you current on OTE as well as base, as well as kind of performance of compensation. So there's certainly benchmarking for that kind of a question. Brad, from your perspective, have you seen or heard of anything other than industry benchmarking?
Industry benchmarking is definitely where I would be putting my focus. And there are organizations that will come in and help you do some of that. We actually have a strategy practice where we help customers, determine, is your compensation aligned with industry best practices? Mm-hmm. Are you paying too much, too little, just right? So there are, and we're not the only ones for sure, that can help with exactly that kind of thing.
So thank you for bringing up your professional services practice, because the question that we originally talked about here was, leveraging your tech stack, specifically incentive comp, to build this incredible culture. We've talked an awful lot about transparency. At the end of the day, though, if you've got a comp plan that's confusing, that nobody really understands, if it's got too many components, really, I think one of the best first steps people can take when they're looking at an incentive comp or any type of a solution is engage in best practices with people who've done this plenty of times before. So part of building the culture is making sure you're setting it up right. It's easy for people to understand, and it's easy for people to get access to. So maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the best practices work you've done, and then we can wrap with any last questions.
Hey, thanks. So we definitely take a hard look at not just what people are trying to do and the technology side of it, but understanding the purpose and the business drivers that our customers are looking at. Because if you don't get that right during the implementation of an incentive comp solution, you're going to miss entirely. It's not just an exercise in, let me stand up this piece of technology. It's not another accounting system. There's a lot of business approach and mindset, especially around, are you building incentive comp plans in a way that are going to motivate sellers? Which is why we see questions like, hey, how do I build spiffs that are meaningful and actually going to drive business for our people? Really common kinds of questions. The other piece of it, and I'm going to kind of shift away just a bit from what you asked me, to some of the value you can get out of using an incentive comp solution, because there's a lot of insights that people can draw from it. There's a lot of analysis that can be done at the corporate level to understand not just what your performance is, like our poll question, but what's happening within the organization? Where are we seeing the most business? Are there areas of business that are costing us money? And the reason an incentive comp tool is a great spot to start and look at that is it has some of the cleanest data that you're going to find within your organization. So transaction data comes in. A lot of times those transaction records, maybe there's at a POS system that somebody's fat fingering or they just don't care. But when it gets to incentive comp, the sales rep is going to let you know very quickly if he's underpaid. He may not be as quick to tell you if he's overpaid, but finance is amazingly good at finding where there's those overpayments. Now you're starting to really end up with very clean, very reliable data that tells you what's happening right at the tip of the spear for your organization, where the business is going. Are you driving the right behavior? Are you getting what you're looking for in the marketplace? And being able to provide some analysis against that data is going to tell you a lot about the health of your business. So sorry, Jackie, I did kind of pivot a bit there, but it's something I wanted to make sure we talked about before we got to the end.
Well, I think that's an interesting point too, like taking the data lens on it, because, you know, if in fact at your company, people are spending 60% of their time, reps and managers are spending 60% of their time on like non-selling activities. If all of a sudden you've got this tool that takes away a lot of the questions and creates a ton of transparency for you, all of a sudden both reps and leadership can move away from the tactical component of the job, which is ticking and bobbing the way through the month. And now, you know, sales managers can have coaching discussions with their reps. Like, you know, to Jordana's point, you know, we're looking for our reps to generate a bunch of net new revenue. Well, let's talk about how you can do that. So it becomes more of a strategic conversation in where you spend your time versus let's run through your pipeline deal by deal. So, you know, all of this contributes to the new culture. So we are at 2:52 Eastern time. I think that we were going to open it up for a couple of more questions and then we were going to wrap.
There is a question in the chat group here from Logan. And he says, due to performance due to performance volatility, how would you position quotations earning potential? There seems to be a fine line between being competitive and being realistic. I get this question a lot. So it's the good old, your on target earnings. What's the OTE? I get what my base is, but what's the OTE? And you'll find that depending on industry, there are a lot of similarities. First of all, if you ever really want to keep your finger on the pulse of what people are making, call a rep at your competition. They'll tell you. Salespeople love to talk about how much money they make. But secondly, I think this also goes back, Logan, to a little bit around visibility. So as an example, if you tell people that they're going to be compensated off of a percentage of gross profit or gross margin, what the hell does that mean to me as a sales rep? Like, you've got to give me some data so that I understand what that percentage is versus it being off of total revenue. The other part is, you're absolutely right. Like, I've got some companies that are only able to right now pay 1 or 2% on of gross profit. I've got other companies that I work with who will pay 8% or 10%. So sometimes it depends on the product or the solution. I think the other part to that question is, you might not be able to be competitive, and you need to be honest about that, because as we mentioned early on, and Brad shared a statistic, I think about within the first 3 months, or it could have been Jackie, you will lose your sales rep so quickly if they find out that you were deceitful with them about their earning potential, because they're going to talk to your other reps and see, oh, wait a minute, no one is earning this. So it's great to say that you've got a 300K OTE, but is it achievable? And are people making it? And reps are starting to ask that question in interviews now.
I think it's all about where do you set the bar. And when I say that, like, what's the quota, what's the target that person has to hit in order to earn that OTE? And it is challenging. Like there's different schools of thought. If you talk to some of the analysts out there, they're going to say you should have 60% of your people attain quota. Maybe it's because I'm got the sales mindset myself. I want to set a quota that everyone on my team can attain, and that's the number that we're going to. And then let's have a stretch target, and everybody gets even higher earnings if you can hit that. So, I read a statistic, or I heard it in a speech a while back. If you look at performance for major marathons, the people that are right on the bubble of crossing a key time like 60 minutes or whatever, those are the people that are going to push the hardest and you're going to have the most impact on. So if you can set that bar in the right place, you're going to have people beat that target. And that's really ultimately, I think, Logan, what you're trying to get to.
Well, I think that I love talking to you both because I have learned so much in speaking with you both in terms of your experience and what you've each seen in your particular roles, and also your mutual love of statistics. It brings us together. Thank you for everybody being here today. If people have questions specific to incentive compensation, Vericent, how the roadmap is changing, new capabilities, new products, new features, I'm your person. Brad is your person for best practices, professional services, implementation, and hot tea. And Jordana is, if incentive compensation doesn't work, regardless of what you try, and you need to find a salesperson, then Jordana is your person. I want to say the biggest thank you to everybody here today.
Jackie, before we go, any key takeaways that you think we should be leaving people with? Or Brad, anyone?
I would think the first thing I can think of is create a culture of transparency. And that is the end result that you're shooting for. And then the symptom of that is better revenue, better turnover, better culture. And there's a bunch of ways to create transparency. It just so happens we're all here today in order to support the route to transparency. That's my takeaway.
I think you nailed it. I think that's really what it is. If we wonder how are you getting and retaining good talent, it does come down to culture, transparency, and building that relationship with them. So, yeah, okay. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks. It looks like Angelica's going to rejoin us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Brad, Jackie, and Jordana for this informative session, and thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Vericent, for sponsoring this event. I'm going to drop their link here, so be sure to check them out. The key takeaways and recording will be made available on the MSP website, so be sure to check that out at the end of the day. And yeah, thank you so much again, panelists. I'll see you in the backstage, and then for those who attended, I'll see you at the next event. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.